Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about something most of us have learned the hard way. Owning a sailboat can be one of the most rewarding things you'll ever do in life, but at times, it can also be one of the most unforgiving. These aren't dramatic, extraordinary accidents. These are slow, quiet, completely preventable failures that end up costing thousands. So let's take a look at the 10 most expensive mistakes sailboat owners make, and more importantly, why they keep making them. The first mistake is skipping or rushing the pre-purchase survey. I understand the excitement. You find a boat that looks right, the price feels reasonable, and you want to close the deal before someone else does. So you either skip the marine survey entirely or hire the cheapest surveyor you can find and ignore half of what they write. The problem is that a 30-year-old hull can look perfectly clean on the outside while hiding osmotic blistering beneath the gel coat. A surveyor walking around the hull with a moisture meter is not being excessive. They're reading the biography of that hull. When you skip this step, you inherit every deferred repair the previous owner avoided. I've seen people buy what they thought was a bargain, a classic cruising sloop sitting quietly in a yard only to discover delaminated decks, corroded chain plates hidden behind interior panels, and keel bolts that haven't been inspected in over a decade. In some cases, the repair bill exceeds what they paid for the boat. A proper survey is not an expense. It's the cheapest insurance you can buy. The second mistake is ignoring standing rigging until something fails. Standing rigging rarely gives dramatic warnings. The swage fittings at the base of a stay can develop hairline cracks you'll never see from the deck. The wire itself can suffer internal corrosion, especially on boats kept in humid coastal environments. Most riggers will tell you that standing rigging on a cruising sailboat should be replaced roughly every 10 to 15 years, depending on use and conditions. But owners look up at shiny wire and assume everything is fine. What they don't see is the fatigue occurring inside each strand where the wire enters the swage terminal. When a stay fails, it doesn't politely fall onto the deck. It often takes the mast with it. Losing a mast offshore is one of the most severe and dangerous structural failures a cruising sailor can experience, and it almost always begins with a fitting that should have been inspected seasons earlier. Replacing standing rigging on a 40-foot sloop isn't cheap, but it's a fraction of the cost of replacing an entire rig from the mast step up. The third mistake is neglecting deck hardware and backing plates. Walk the deck of any cruising sailboat and count how many pieces of hardware are bolted through the fiberglass cleats, Genoa tracks, stanchion bases, winches. Each one transfers load through the deck structure. Over years of sailing, these fittings move slightly under load. Sealant around the bolt holes degrades. Water finds its way in. The core material beneath the fiberglass, often plywood or balsa, begins to rot in small, dark circles around each bolt. From above, the deck still looks fine. Underneath, the structure is softening. I've pressed my thumb into deck core that should have felt like solid wood but crumbled like wet bread. Repairing a section of rotten deck core means cutting open the top skin, removing damaged core, replacing it, and re-laminating. Multiply that by a dozen leaking fittings over years, and the project becomes enormous. An afternoon with proper marine sealant and a screwdriver could have prevented it. The fourth mistake is treating the engine as secondary because it's a sailboat. I hear this often. I bought a sailboat to sail, not to motor. It's a lovely philosophy until your diesel won't start while you're trying to enter a narrow harbor with cross-current. The auxiliary engine on a cruising sailboat is not optional equipment. It's critical safety infrastructure. Yet owners skip oil changes, delay fuel filter replacements, let raw water impellers become brittle, and forget to close seacocks when the engine isn't running. A well-maintained marine diesel can run for thousands of hours. A neglected one will fail at the worst possible time, usually when the weather is turning and you need safe harbor. Engine replacements in sailboats are particularly expensive, not because of the engine itself, but because of access. Removing a diesel through a narrow companionway is not a job any yard enjoys quoting. The fifth mistake is ignoring the electrical system because it seems to work. Sailboat electrical panels age poorly, especially on boats where equipment has been added over the years without upgrading the wiring. Open the panel behind the nav station on a 20-year-old cruiser and you'll often find unlabeled wires, corroded terminals, and circuits no one can trace. The real danger here isn't inconvenience, it's fire. Corroded connections create resistance. Resistance creates heat. In an enclosed fiberglass and teak interior, that's how boats burn at the dock. Beyond fire risk, Poor wiring can cause stray current corrosion that silently eats your underwater metals, bronze seacocks, propeller shafts, rudder fittings. Rewiring a boat is a major project, but discovering the problem after a destroyed shaft or seacock is worse. The sixth mistake is failing to inspect and maintain seacocks. Every through hole below the waterline is a potential flooding point. On older boats, original bronze fittings may have been sitting in saltwater for decades. Dezincification can leave them looking solid but structurally weak and brittle. Tap a suspect fitting with a wrench. Healthy bronze rings. Dezincified bronze sounds dull. Seacocks should be opened and closed regularly so they don't seize in place. A failed seacock while the boat sits unattended at the dock is how boats sink on calm, sunny days. It's not dramatic. It's just physics. The seventh mistake is choosing the cheapest yard or attempting critical structural repairs without proper knowledge. There's nothing wrong with doing your own maintenance. But structural fiberglass work requires understanding layup schedules, resin chemistry, surface preparation, and curing conditions. A poorly repaired keel joint can fail in life-threatening ways offshore. Choosing the cheapest yard for critical work often means rushed jobs, improper materials, or poor documentation. I've seen boats hauled to correct previous repairs where polyester resin was applied over epoxy, or structural bulkheads tabbed with a single thin layer of cloth. The most expensive repair is always the one you have to do twice. The eighth mistake is ignoring anodes and galvanic protection. Those dull zinc blocks bolted to your hull and shaft are not decorative. They exist to corrode instead of your expensive underwater hardware. When zincs are depleted and not replaced, corrosion moves to the next least noble metal, usually your propeller, shaft, or bronze fittings. In marinas with shore power, galvanic corrosion can destroy underwater metals in a single season. Replacing a prop and shaft requires hauling, alignment, and potentially new cutlass bearings, all because someone thought a half-worn zinc would last one more season. The ninth mistake is neglecting the anchoring system. Your anchor system is arguably the most important safety system on a cruising sailboat, yet many owners cruise with undersized anchors, short chain, and poorly maintained windlasses. A chain locker is a hostile environment, wet, salty, poorly ventilated. Chain left unchecked develops rust and weakened links. A windlass has gears, a motor, and a clutch, all requiring maintenance. If it fails while anchoring in a crowded bay with a storm approaching, you're suddenly handling heavy chain by hand on a pitching foredeck. Even the final attachment point between chain and boat, often a nylon rod tied inside the locker, is something many owners never inspect. If that fails, your entire ground tackle disappears overboard. The cost of maintaining an anchor system is insignificant compared to dragging ashore at 3 in the morning. The 10th mistake is postponing maintenance year after year. This is the most common and destructive pattern in boat ownership. It starts small: a leaking fitting, a worn halyard, a sticking bilge pump switch. Each item seems minor. But deferred maintenance accumulates like interest on debt. A leaking fitting softens core. Soft core weakens surrounding hardware. Weak hardware shifts under load and allows more water in. 3 years later, you're rebuilding a foredeck instead of resealing a fitting. I've walked through brokerage listings where the deferred maintenance list was longer than the equipment inventory. These were once beautiful, capable cruising boats, turned into floating project lists because their owners kept saying, "Next season." Most expensive failures I've seen weren't caused by storms or bad luck. They were caused by neglect by owners who loved the idea of their boat more than the discipline of maintaining it. A cruising sailboat rewards attention to small things: seals, fasteners, wire connections, zincs, the quiet signals that something is beginning to change. The ocean doesn't care about your intentions. It only responds to the condition of your boat. That's what I wanted to share with you today. If you are interested in boats, I would be very happy if you wrote about your experiences in the comments. People will read them, and it will create a good atmosphere. But I must mention this without forgetting. The information shared in this video is for general informational and educational purposes only. Each boat, situation, and condition may be different. Always consult a qualified marine surveyor, rigger, marine engineer, or expert technician regarding structural repairs, electrical system interventions, engine maintenance, bilge valves, fixed rigging replacement, and other safety-critical procedures. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.